October 15th, 1982, Miami. Carmen Vega watched through binoculars as Pablo Escobar laughed at Griselda Blanco's face, called her a cheap whore playing dress-up in a man's game. The godmother said nothing, just smiled. 24 hours later, 4 of Escobar's men were found gift-wrapped outside his Coral Gables mansion. Their throats slit, a white orchid placed on each chest Blanco's signature. Carmen had the intel to stop it. One radio call would have saved those men. But blowing her cover meant losing 3 years of infiltration, meant letting the biggest cocaine pipeline in DEA history slip away. She chose the mission over the men. The newspapers called it the night the Queen of Cocaine declared war on the king. But only Carmen knew the truth. She didn't just witness the massacre, she enabled it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Now, 42 years later, Carmen Vega's hands trembled as she stared at the photograph that had just tumbled from a manila envelope onto her bookstore counter. The same white orchid, the same precise brutality. But this time, the victim's face was clearly visible in the crime scene photo, and it wasn't from 1982. The body had been discovered 3 blocks from her Key Biscayne bookstore, yesterday. Carmen's coffee mug shattered against the hardwood floor, sending ceramic shards skittering across the narrow aisles of pages and prose. The bitter liquid seeped between the floorboards like spilled blood, and for a moment she was back in that Miami warehouse, watching through her scope as Escobar's gold tooth glinted in the dim light while he degraded the most dangerous woman in Colombia. The bell above her shop door chimed. Carmen's hand instinctively moved toward the Glock 19 she still kept taped beneath the register old habits from a life she'd supposedly left behind. But it was only Mrs. Henderson, her Tuesday regular, clutching a romance novel to her chest like armor. "Morning, dear. You look pale. Everything all right?" Carmen forced her face into the practiced smile she'd perfected over 2 decades of civilian life. "Just tired. The new shipment came in early." Mrs. Henderson nodded sympathetically and disappeared into the mystery section. Carmen swept the photograph back into the envelope with shaking fingers, her eyes catching on the return address. There wasn't one, just her name written in careful block letters that made her blood run cold. Someone knew exactly who Carmen Vega used to be. She locked the envelope in her office safe, hands moving with muscle memory through the combination she'd changed monthly for 20 years. Inside, next to her emergency cash and backup identity papers, sat the only other reminder of her DEA days, a small digital recorder containing her final debriefing, the confession she'd never officially made. The shop's landline rang, its shrill cry cutting through the Tuesday morning quiet. Carmen stared at it for 3 rings before answering, pages in prose, silence, then breathing. "Carmen." The voice was female, accented, controlled. Not Colombian something else. East Coast educated but with Latin undertones carefully smoothed away by expensive schools and careful practice. "I think you have the wrong number. Agent Vega." The voice carried certainty like a blade. "Or do you prefer the name you used in the field? Maria Santos, wasn't it? The woman who sold religious artifacts to launder cartel money while feeding intelligence to Langley?" Carmen's grip tightened on the receiver. Only 5 people had known her cover identity. 3 were dead. 1 was in federal witness protection. The 5th, "What do you want?" To finish a conversation that started 42 years ago, when you watched my mother's humiliation and decided 4 men's lives were an acceptable sacrifice for your career. Blanco's daughter. Carmen's mind raced through fragments of intelligence reports from the 80s. Griselda had kept her children far from the business, shipped them off to European boarding schools and American universities. The daughter would be in her 50s now, educated, connected, patient enough to spend decades tracking down a ghost. Your mother made her own choices, because you gave her the opportunity. My sources tell me you had advance warning about Escobar's planned insult, about the meeting location, the security gaps. The voice remained perfectly modulated, but something cold crept in around the edges. You could have prevented everything that followed. Instead, you let her walk into that warehouse knowing exactly what would happen. Carmen closed her eyes. The mission. Saved hundreds of lives by stopping the cocaine pipeline, yes. I've read your file. Very impressive. Very clean. Except for the part where you played God with my family. Mrs. Henderson appeared at the counter, setting down her selected novel with a bright smile. Carmen waved her toward the register while keeping the phone pressed to her ear. If you wanted revenge, you've had 40 years to take it. Revenge? The daughter laughed, and the sound carried an echo of Griselda's cruel amusement. I'm not calling for revenge, Agent Vega. I'm calling because I need your help. The line went dead. Carmen stood frozen, listening to the dial tone while Mrs. Henderson counted out exact change for her book. The elderly woman's cheerful chatter about her grandson's wedding plans felt like it was coming from another dimension. When the door chimed behind her departure, Carmen was alone again with the weight of her past pressing against her chest like a physical thing. She walked to the front window and peered through the blinds at the quiet residential street. A jogger passed by. A landscaping truck idled outside the cafe next door. Everything normal. Everything exactly as it had been for 20 peaceful years. Except now, someone who shared Griselda Blanco's blood knew exactly where to find her, and they wanted her help. Carmen returned to her safe and pulled out the emergency cell phone she'd hoped never to use. Her fingers hesitated over the keypad before dialing the number she'd memorized but never called. Federal Bureau of Investigation. How may I direct your call? I need to speak with Agent Martinez in the Miami field office. Tell him Carmen Vega is calling in the favor he owes me. The game was starting again, and this time she wouldn't have the luxury of choosing between mission and morality. This time, both might demand the same terrible price. Carmen? Jesus Christ, I thought you were dead. Agent Martinez's voice carried the weight of 2 decades, deeper now, roughened by cigarettes he'd promised to quit when they'd last worked together. She could picture him in some sterile Miami field office, probably grayer, definitely softer around the middle, wearing the same cheap suits that made federal agents instantly recognizable to anyone who'd lived her life. Not dead, just buried. Carmen traced the edge of her desk blotter with one finger, following the worn leather binding that had witnessed countless quiet mornings before today shattered her illusion of safety. I need a background check, off the books. After 20 years of radio silence, that's your opening? No, how's the family? No, Griselda Blanco's daughter. Mid-50s, well-educated, probably using an American identity now. I need everything you can find. Carmen's voice emerged steady, professional, slipping back into the cadence of her former life like a familiar coat retrieved from storage. And Martinez? This one's personal. The silence stretched between them, filled with the memory of shared operations and the unspoken understanding that people like them never truly retired. They just changed addresses. The Black Widow's been dead for over a decade, Carmen. What's this about? Through her office window, Carmen watched Mrs. Henderson's granddaughter, Sophia, arrive for her usual Tuesday volunteer shift. 19 years old, studying literature at she sorted returns and recommended books to customers with the earnest enthusiasm of someone who still believed the world was fundamentally good. Carmen had watched her grow from a gap-toothed 10-year-old who begged for extra story time to this young woman who brought homemade empanadas and called her Tia Carmen with genuine affection. Someone's using vintage cartel methods to send me messages, Carmen said, her eyes never leaving Sophia as she unlocked the front door and flipped the afternoon hours sign. White orchid calling cards, bodies arranged with Blanco's signature style, and they know exactly who I used to be. Shit. Martinez's breathing shifted, and she heard the familiar click of him lighting a cigarette. Some habits never changed. You sure it's the daughter? She called. Knew my cover name, the Langley connection, operational details from the '82 incident. Carmen's fingers found the small silver cross she'd worn every day since leaving the agency, part of her artifact dealer cover that had somehow become real comfort over the years. She wants my help, not revenge. Which makes it worse. How so? Because it means she still doesn't know the whole truth about that night, about what I let happen. Carmen closed her eyes, but the warehouse scene played behind her eyelids anyway. Escobar's mocking laughter, Griselda's humiliated rage, the weight of the rifle she'd aimed but never fired. She thinks I was her mother's ally. Sophia's laughter drifted from the main shop as she discovered the new mystery display Carmen had arranged that morning. The sound was bright, uncomplicated, Everything Carmen's world had been before a manila envelope arrived to remind her that sins didn't disappear just because you changed your name and learned to recommend romance novels. Carmen, listen to me. If this is really Blanco's daughter, she's not just some grieving child looking for closure. That woman raised her kids to be survivors. Educated, connected, patient. If she's surfacing now, after all this time, it's because she needs something only you can provide. Or because she's finally ready to finish what her mother started. Either way, you can't handle this alone. Come in. We'll put you in protective custody while— No! The word came out sharper than intended. Carmen softened her tone, watching Sophia arrange books with the same careful attention Carmen had once given to surveillance photos. I won't run again. This is my life now. These are my people. Through the office doorway, she could see the entire small kingdom she'd built from nothing, shelves lined with stories that had never betrayed anyone. Reading nooks where neighborhood kids discovered new worlds. The community bulletin board covered with local announcements for church dinners and lost cats and guitar lessons. Normal problems, safe problems, problems that wouldn't survive if her past decided to fully resurface in Key Biscayne. 24 hours, Martinez said finally. I'll have what you need by tomorrow. But Carmen, if this goes sideways, if bodies start dropping in your neighborhood because you're too stubborn to accept help— I know, Carmen whispered, watching Sophia hum while she worked, oblivious to the dangerous ghosts circling closer to their quiet sanctuary. I know exactly what I stand to lose. The manila envelope sat on her desk like a cancer, its beige surface innocent enough to fool anyone who hadn't spent decades learning to recognize threats wrapped in ordinary packages. Carmen's fingers hovered over it before she forced herself to look away. She'd memorized every detail already. The precise placement of the white orchid, the victim's surprised expression frozen in death, the surgical precision of wounds that spoke to training few people possessed. Someone had wanted her to know this wasn't random violence. The bell chimed as a customer entered, followed by Sophia's warm greeting. Carmen listened to the familiar rhythm of her afternoon routine recommendations offered, pages rustling as browsers sampled first chapters, the soft thud of books being shelved with care. Sounds she'd treasured for 20 years because they meant safety, anonymity, a life where her deadliest decision was whether to order extra copies of the latest bestseller. All of it built on the foundation of a lie. Her computer chimed with an email notification. Carmen's blood chilled as she recognized the sender, ArtaColombian1970 at protonmail.com. The subject line read simply, "We should meet." Carmen's hand trembled as she opened it. No lengthy message, just an address in Coral Gables and a time tonight. 8 p.m. Come alone. We have much to discuss about family legacies. The signature made her breath catch. V. Santos. Santos. The name hit like a physical blow. Carmen closed her eyes. But the memories flooded back anyway. A 12-year-old girl with Griselda's dark eyes and her father's gentle smile, shipped off to a Swiss boarding school weeks before the warehouse incident. Carmen had seen the intelligence photos, read the reports. Valeria Santos Blanco, oldest daughter, kept carefully separate from the family business. The girl who'd loved horses and mathematics, who'd written letters to her mother in careful English about school friends and riding competitions and dreams of becoming an architect. Now that child had grown into someone who arranged bodies like art installations and knew exactly how to find a federal agent who'd been dead on paper for 2 decades. Tia Carmen? You okay? Sophia appeared in the doorway, concern creasing her young face. In the afternoon light, she looked so much like Carmen's sister had at that age, the sister who'd died in a car accident while Carmen was deep undercover, unable even to attend the funeral without blowing her cover. Another sacrifice to the mission, another piece of herself she'd carved away to serve the greater good. Just tired, mija. Long day. Want me to close up? I finished the returns, and it's pretty quiet. Sophia tilted her head, studying Carmen with the intensity of someone who'd inherited both intelligence and stubborn affection. You've seemed off since this morning. Did something happen? Everything, Carmen thought. 20 years of carefully constructed peace just collapsed, and I'm about to walk into a meeting that might get us all killed. No, nothing happened. But yes, would you mind closing? I have an appointment tonight. Sophia nodded, but her expression remained troubled. You know you can talk to me, right? I mean, I know you like your privacy, but if someone's bothering you... The offer hit like a knife between the ribs. This beautiful, brave young woman was volunteering to help fight demons she couldn't possibly understand, just like Carmen had once done, walking into situations that seemed manageable until they destroyed everything she'd thought she believed about herself. I'm fine, sweetheart, really, just old business that needs attention. After Sophia left, Carmen locked the store and climbed the narrow stairs to her apartment above the shop. The space felt smaller tonight, walls pressing closer as shadows lengthened across furniture she'd chosen for comfort rather than quick escape routes. 20 years of believing she'd earned the right to think like a civilian, and now every corner held potential ambush points. She pulled her go-bag from the bedroom closet, the one thing she'd never unpacked, never trusted herself to abandon completely. Inside, cash in 3 currencies, identification documents for 2 backup identities. The Glock she'd hoped never to carry again. The weight of it in her hands brought back muscle memory she'd tried to forget. At 7:30, Carmen stood before her bathroom mirror and studied the woman she'd become. Gray threads in dark hair she'd once kept severely pulled back, laugh lines earned from 20 years of book recommendations and community potlucks, soft hands that had forgotten the calluses of constant weapon handling. But her eyes remained the same flat brown that reflected nothing, trained not to give away secrets even to her own reflection. Carmen Vega, retired DEA agent, was about to meet the daughter of the woman whose death she'd orchestrated. And she still didn't know whether Valeria Santos wanted redemption or revenge. Either way, the quiet life she'd built was ending tonight. Carmen sat in her Honda Civic outside the Coral Gables address for 20 minutes, engine off, watching shadows move behind curtained windows of the Spanish colonial house. The neighborhood whispered, old money-manicured lawns, luxury sedans in circular driveways, the kind of respectable wealth that asked no questions about its origins. She'd chosen civilian clothes but kept the Glock in a shoulder holster beneath her jacket, its familiar weight both comfort and condemnation. At exactly 8 o'clock, she walked to the front door. It opened before she could knock. Agent Vega. The woman who answered was beautiful in the way that money and careful breeding produced sharp cheekbones, designer clothes that fit like they'd been sewn onto her body, dark hair pulled into a chignon that revealed diamond earrings worth more than Carmen's annual bookstore revenue. But her eyes held Griselda's calculating coldness, and Carmen's hand instinctively shifted closer to her weapon. You're punctual. I appreciate that in people. Ms. Santos, please, call me Valeria. She stepped aside, gesturing Carmen into a living room that belonged in Architectural Digest Persian rugs, original paintings, furniture arranged to suggest intimate conversation while maintaining clear sightlines to all exits. Professional, Carmen noted. This woman had learned more than mathematics at those European schools. Can I offer you something? Wine? Coffee? Nothing. Carmen remained standing, cataloging details. Fresh orchids in a crystal vase. Security system panel by the door, armed. No family photos, but a single framed image on the mantel, Griselda Blanco holding a young girl's hand outside what looked like a Swiss chalet. Mother and daughter, frozen in a moment before everything went wrong. Valeria followed her gaze. I was 14 when that was taken. Christmas break, 1981. She flew to Zurich to see me, even though the heat was getting bad in Miami. Spent 3 days pretending to be a normal mother, helping me shop for presents to send my classmates. Her voice carried no emotion, but something flickered behind her controlled expression. It was the last time I saw her alive. Carmen said nothing. In her experience, guilty people filled silence with explanations. The innocent waited. She died believing you were her ally, Valeria continued, settling gracefully into an armchair positioned to keep Carmen in full view. The artifact dealer who fed her intelligence about rival operations, who warned her when law enforcement was closing in. She trusted you completely. The words hit like physical blows, but Carmen kept her face neutral. Your mother trusted no one completely. She trusted you enough to call you the night before she died. From that hotel in Medellin, 3 bullets in her chest, bleeding out on marble floors. Valeria's composure cracked slightly, revealing something raw beneath. Her last words were about you, about the favor you still owed her. Carmen's blood turned to ice. Griselda had survived the initial assassination attempt, lived long enough to make a phone call. The intelligence reports had been wrong or deliberately sanitized. What favor? Protection for her children. Insurance, she called it. A guarantee that if anything happened to her, someone would watch over us. Valeria stood, moving to the window that overlooked the darkened street. She gave me your contact information. Said if I ever needed help, truly needed it, I should find Carmen Vega and remind her of the debt she owed. I don't owe your family anything. Don't you? Valeria turned, and for a moment her mask slipped completely, revealing desperate fear beneath the polished exterior. My brother is dead. Overdose in Barcelona, supposedly accidental. My youngest sister, car accident in Prague last month. Very clean. Very professional. Someone is eliminating Griselda Blanco's children, and I'm the only one left. Carmen felt the familiar weight of operational awareness settling over her threat assessment, exit strategies, the calculating coldness that had once made her excellent at her job and terrible at being human. Why come to me? You have money, connections, higher private security, because whoever is hunting us knows about my mother's network. They've identified every safe house, every contact, every resource she left behind. Valeria moved closer, and Carmen caught the scent of expensive perfume mixed with something else, fierce sweat, carefully disguised but unmistakable to someone who'd learned to read desperation in a dozen languages. They killed my security team last week. 3 former Israeli commandos, dead in their sleep. No forced entry, no signs of struggle. Just white orchids left on their chests. The signature. Carmen's mind raced through possibilities, who had access to Griselda's methods, who held grudges that would span decades, who possessed the resources and patience for this kind of systematic elimination. You think it's connected to what happened in 1982. I think someone has been waiting 40 years to finish what started that night, and you're the only person left alive who knows the whole truth about that warehouse. Valeria's voice dropped to a whisper. Help me find who killed my family, Agent Vega, before they kill me too. Outside, a car engine started in the darkness. Both women froze, listening to footsteps approach the front door. Are you expecting someone? Carmen whispered. Valeria shook her head, her breathing shallow and rapid. In the lamplight, she looked suddenly young, not the polished woman who'd orchestrated their meeting, but a terrified daughter watching her family disappear one by one. 3 soft knocks echoed through the house, deliberate, patient. Carmen drew her Glock, the weight familiar despite decades of disuse. She motioned for Valeria to stay back, approaching the door with the careful steps of someone who'd learned that overconfidence killed more agents than enemy bullets. The security panel blinked green, system armed but not triggered. Whoever was outside knew how to approach without setting off motion sensors. Through the peephole, she saw only darkness. The porch light had been disabled. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Carmen glanced at the screen, her blood freezing as she read, "We know you're inside. Open the door. We just want to talk." The number was blocked, but the timing was impossible to ignore. Whoever was hunting Valeria's family had followed one of them here, or had been watching this house all along, waiting for exactly this moment. What does it say? Valeria's voice was barely audible. Carmen showed her the message. Valeria's face went white as bone. They found me. Jesus Christ, they actually found me. Back exit? Carmen was already moving, her mind cataloging the house's layout. Spanish colonial meant thick walls but limited escape routes. If this was a professional team, they'd have the rear covered. Pool house leads to the neighbor's yard, gate in the back fence. Valeria was grabbing a leather messenger bag from behind the couch, her movements quick but controlled. Even terrified, she moved like someone who'd planned for this moment. Another text arrived. Miss Santos, we have your housekeeper Maria and her daughter Sophia in a car outside. Lovely family. Open the door in 60 seconds or we'll send you pieces. Sophia. The name hit Carmen like a physical blow before her rational mind caught up. Different Sophia. Not her Sophia, but the coincidence still sent ice through her veins. Valeria was staring at her phone with the expression of someone watching their world collapse. They have Maria, she whispered. She's worked for my family for 15 years. Her daughter is only 8 years old. Carmen's operational training warred with something deeper, the part of her that had spent 2 decades in a community where people protected each other. where Maria might be Mrs. Gonzalez from the church committee, and Sophia could be any child who deserved better than becoming collateral damage in someone else's war. It could be a lie, Carmen said, but she was already moving toward the front door. A pressure tactic to force you into the open. Maria always stays late on Tuesdays. She brings Sophia to help with laundry. Valeria's voice cracked. They're not lying. They wouldn't risk this operation on a bluff. Through the window, Carmen caught a glimpse of movement dark sedan with tinted windows, engine running, professional positioning, blocking the main escape route while maintaining mobility. These weren't cartel soldiers high on their own product. This was a surgical team with resources and patience. 30 seconds. Carmen closed her eyes, feeling the weight of every decision that had led to this moment. The warehouse in 1982, when she'd chosen mission over morality. The 20 years of hiding behind book recommendations and community potlucks. The phone call to Martinez that had dragged her back into a world where 8-year-old girls became leverage in games they couldn't understand. There's another way, she said quietly. Valeria looked up from her phone, hope flickering across her features. What? I opened the door. You go out the back, get to the neighbor's house, call 911, disappear into whatever backup plan you've been building for 40 years. Carmen's voice was steady, professional, empty of everything except tactical assessment. They want both of us, but they need me alive to find whatever they're really looking for. I buy you time. They'll torture you for information. They'll try. Carmen checked her weapon one final time, surprised by how natural it felt in her hands. But I've been tortured by experts. I held out for 3 days in Honduras before extraction. These people, whoever they are, they're good, but they're not government trained. And if you're wrong, if they just put a bullet in your head? Carmen thought about her bookstore, dark and empty 3 miles away. Mrs. Henderson would worry when Carmen didn't open tomorrow. Sophia would arrive for her volunteer shift and find the doors locked. The life she'd helped build suddenly vanished without explanation. Another person who'd trusted Carmen, left behind to wonder what had gone wrong. Then make sure they pay for it, Carmen said and opened the door. Mid-50s, silver-haired, wearing an expensive suit that suggested boardrooms rather than bloodshed. He smiled at her with genuine warmth, the kind of expression she'd seen countless times from customers browsing her bookstore. Behind him stood 2 younger men in dark clothing, but they held their positions with the relaxed confidence of professionals who weren't expecting trouble. Agent Vega, the man said, extending his hand like they were meeting for dinner. Detective Martinez sends his regards. Carmen's world tilted. Martinez, her former handler, the one person who knew she was still alive, who'd helped orchestrate her death and resurrection 20 years ago. The weapon in her hands suddenly felt impossibly heavy. You seem surprised, the man continued, stepping into the foyer without invitation. May I? It's quite cold tonight, and we have a great deal to discuss. Behind her, Carmen heard the soft sound of a door closing. Valeria had made her choice, running for the back exit as planned. Good. Whatever this was, whoever these people represented, at least one of them might survive the next hour. Detective Martinez is retired, Carmen managed, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. Ah, but retirement is such a flexible concept in our business, don't you think? The man gestured toward the living room where she and Valeria had been talking moments before. Please put the weapon away. If we'd wanted you dead, you would have been dead 20 years ago. The words hit like ice water. Carmen lowered the Glock but didn't holster it, her mind racing through possibilities. Martinez had been her lifeline during the undercover operation, the one person she'd trusted completely. He'd arranged her extraction, her new identity, her quiet exile to civilian life. If he was involved in this, who were you? Someone who's been cleaning up the mess you left behind in 1982. The man settled into the same chair Valeria had occupied, completely at ease, though I suppose you is inaccurate. The mess we left behind, all of us who made that night possible. Carmen remained standing, every instinct screaming danger. What do you want? To explain why Valeria Santos Blanco's siblings are dead and why you've been living a lie for 2 decades. He pulled out his phone, swiped to a photo, and held it toward her. Do you recognize this girl? The image showed a young woman with dark hair and laughing eyes, standing outside what looked like a university library. Carmen's blood turned to ice as recognition hit, not from memory, but from 20 years of daily interaction. The bone structure was different, the hair color changed, but the smile— "Sofia," she whispered. "Sofia Martinez. Valeria's youngest sister, supposedly killed in a car accident in Prague last month. Except she wasn't in Prague, was she? She was in Key Biscayne, volunteering at a lovely little bookstore, helping the woman who'd been paid to watch over her since childhood." The room spun around Carmen. Every Tuesday and Thursday for 3 years, every bright smile and offered cup of coffee, every moment of genuine affection she'd felt for the girl who'd reminded her of her dead sister. All of it orchestrated, all of it a lie. "You've been her handler this entire time," the man continued, his voice gentle but relentless. "Protecting Griselda Blanco's youngest daughter while believing she was just another local volunteer. Martinez arranged it all: the bookstore location, Sofia's enrollment at the university, even her interest in literature. He's been managing both sides of the equation for 20 years. Carmen sank into a chair, the weight of revelation crushing down on her. The surveillance photos, the package, Sofia's work. She needed you to remember 1982, to understand why her siblings were dying. She was supposed to reveal herself gradually, earn your trust before asking for help." The man's expression turned sympathetic. But professional killers don't wait for convenient timing. Someone started eliminating Blanco's children, and Sofia got desperate. "Valeria? An actress, paid to play the grieving sister, to give you someone to protect, while Sofia observed how you'd handle the pressure." He leaned forward, and Carmen caught something predatory in his eyes despite his grandfatherly demeanor. "The girl you've been mentoring for 3 years, the one who brings you coffee and asks about your weekend plans, she's the real target. And you're the only thing standing between her and whoever wants her dead." Through the walls, Carmen heard the distant sound of sirens. Valeria, whoever she really was, had followed instructions and called for help. But help from whom? If Martinez was involved, if the entire DEA connection was compromised. "Where is she?" Carmen's voice came out deadly quiet, the tone that had once made cartel bosses reconsider their life choices. "Where is Sofia?" The man smiled, and Carmen finally understood why her instincts had been screaming danger. "That," he said, "depends entirely on how cooperative you're willing to be. Sofia's safe," the man continued, studying Carmen's face for tells. "For now, she's waiting in a secure location, probably wondering why her beloved mentor hasn't answered her texts about tomorrow's book delivery." Carmen's phone buzzed. She glanced down. "Carmen, are you okay? The police were at your house, but you weren't there. I'm worried." "Sweet girl," the man observed. "Genuinely cares about you. That wasn't part of the original arrangement, you know. Martinez expected professional distance, regular reports, nothing more. But children have a way of complicating the best-laid plans." The sirens were getting closer. Carmen calculated distance, response time, the likelihood that whoever was coming would be friend or foe. If Martinez had orchestrated everything, if the DEA connections were compromised— "What do you want?" she repeated. The truth about that night in 1982. The real truth, not the sanitized version in your official reports. The man leaned back, completely relaxed despite the approaching sirens. "You see, someone's been eliminating Griselda's children based on information that could only have come from inside the operation. Details about safe houses, financial networks, family connections, things only a handful of people ever knew." Carmen's mind raced back 20 years. The warehouse, the humid Miami night, Pablo Escobar's mocking laughter echoing off concrete walls. Griselda's face when he'd humiliated her in front of her own lieutenants, called her a paranoid bitch playing at being a man while her soldiers shifted uncomfortably and avoided eye contact. "There was a recording device," she said slowly. "Very good. Hidden in your wire but broadcasting on a frequency the DEA wasn't monitoring. Someone else was listening that night. Someone who heard every word of Griselda's response, including the names of people she trusted, locations she considered secure, and her plans for protecting her children." The room felt suddenly airless. Carmen remembered Griselda's voice after Escobar left, speaking rapid Spanish into a payphone while Carmen pretended to examine artifacts in the corner. Family names, bank account numbers, contact information for a network spanning 3 continents. "You recorded her," Carmen whispered. "We recorded everything. Insurance, we called it. Information to be used if circumstances changed. The man's expression turned almost apologetic. We never intended for anyone to get hurt. But when Griselda was killed 6 months later, certain people saw an opportunity to permanently close that chapter of cartel history. By murdering her children, by eliminating loose ends. Children grow up, Agent Vega. They ask questions about their dead mothers. They inherit money and connections and sometimes very inconvenient memories. He pulled out another phone, showed her a photograph of Sophia laughing over coffee in the bookstore. This one is particularly problematic. Bright mind, excellent memory, and a growing interest in her family's real history. The sirens had stopped. Through the window, Carmen saw flashing lights, but the vehicles were remaining at a distance. Perimeter, not rescue. You're cleaning house, she realized. All of you. Everyone who was involved in 1982. 40 years is a long time to carry secrets. People get careless. They develop consciences. His eyes fixed on hers with predatory intensity. They start thinking about deathbed confessions and legacy guilt. Much safer to simply close the file permanently. Carmen's phone buzzed again. Sophia, still worried, still trusting. The girl who brought her coffee and asked about weekend plans, who'd brightened 20 years of careful isolation with genuine affection. The daughter of a dead cartel queen, protected by lies and manipulation, but loved nonetheless. She doesn't know who she really is, Carmen said. Of course not. Martinez felt it was safer that way. Let her grow up normal, American, untainted by her mother's legacy. Just another college student with a part-time volunteer job. The man stood, smoothing his expensive suit. But ignorance only works as protection if everyone agrees to maintain it. And I'm afraid our agreement is coming to an end. Outside, Carmen heard car doors slamming, voices giving orders, the sound of professionals taking positions around the house. Not police, something else entirely. The choice is simple, the man continued. Help us locate the recording from that night, and Sophia disappears safely. New identity, new life. Somewhere far from all of this, or refuse, and watch her learn her mother's history in the most painful way possible. Carmen stood slowly, 20 years of buried instincts flooding back, the weight of the Glock in her hand, the familiar calculation of odds, exits, acceptable losses, the cold mathematics of survival that had once made her excellent at her job and terrible at being human. Through the walls she heard movement, careful footsteps, whispered communications. They weren't alone anymore. Where is she? Carmen asked quietly. The man smiled, and in that expression she finally saw the truth that had been staring at her all along. Closer than you think. She looked exactly the same, dark hair pulled back, university sweatshirt, the bright smile that had lit up Carmen's Tuesdays and Thursdays for 3 years. But her eyes held something different now. Knowledge, purpose, the weight of truth that Carmen recognized from her own mirror. Hello, Carmen, Sophia said quietly, and in her voice Carmen heard echoes of Griselda Blanco's steel beneath velvet tone. The man in the expensive suit gestured toward a chair he'd arranged beside his own. Sophia moved with fluid grace, settling beside him with the ease of long familiarity. Not a hostage, never a hostage. I'm sorry about the deception, Sophia continued, her gaze never leaving Carmen's face. But I had to know who you really were, whether you were the federal agent who watched my mother die, or the woman who spent 3 years teaching me about Neruda and bringing me soup when I had the flu. Carmen felt the last pieces of her carefully constructed world crumbling. You knew. This entire time you knew. Not everything. Uncle Martinez told me my parents died in a car accident when I was 5. Said the bookstore job would be good for me, help me learn responsibility and make connections in the community. Sophia's smile turned rueful. He never mentioned that my supervisor was a former DEA agent who'd been present at my mother's death. That part I discovered on my own. The older man, Carmen, now understood he wasn't the antagonist but merely Sophia's representative, leaned forward with grandfatherly concern. Sophia has been investigating her family's history for 2 years. University resources, genealogy databases, public records. She's remarkably thorough. I found the warehouse incident report, Sophia said simply. Heavily redacted, but your operational number was there. cross-referenced with federal employment records, traced through the witness protection database Martinez thought was secure. Her voice carried pride mixed with sadness. My mother was paranoid, but she was also brilliant. She taught me to research everything, trust nothing at face value. Carmen remembered Griselda's voice that humid night in 1982, speaking rapid Spanish about teaching her children to verify, to question, to never accept easy answers. Even in death, even through decades of protective lies, Griselda had shaped her daughter into someone who would eventually uncover the truth. "Your siblings," Carmen began, "are alive and well in Argentina," Sophia interrupted. "The deaths were staged, identities altered, lives rebuilt far from anyone who might remember our mother's enemies. But someone has been asking questions, getting close to finding them, someone with access to classified files and federal resources." The weight of understanding settled on Carmen's shoulders. "Martinez," Sophia nodded. "Uncle Martinez, who saved me from the orphanage and gave me a beautiful American life, who also kept detailed files on our locations, our new identities, our weaknesses." Her voice cracked slightly. "He's been selling information to the highest bidder for months. My siblings barely escaped. Through the window, Carmen saw the perimeter vehicles were gone. No sirens, no flashing lights. The only sound was the gentle hum of the bookstore's heating system, warming a conversation that was reshaping both their worlds. "You sent the surveillance photos," Carmen said. "I needed you to remember, to understand why someone wanted my family dead." Sophia leaned forward, her expression intense with desperate hope. "I thought if you knew the truth about that night, about how your silence led to everything that followed, you'd help me stop Martinez before he could finish what he started." Carmen stood slowly, walking to the window that overlooked the quiet street where she'd built 20 years of peaceful deception. Mrs. Henderson's house was dark. The community she'd pretended to belong to slept peacefully, unaware that two women who'd been shaped by the same night of violence were finally facing each other across the wreckage of their shared past. "I watched your mother die," Carmen said quietly. "I could have prevented it, could have warned her about Escobar's plans, but I chose to protect my mission instead." "I know." Sophia's voice was soft, understanding. "I've known for months." Carmen turned back to face her. "And you still brought me coffee every Tuesday, still asked about my weekend plans, because somewhere in those 3 years, you stopped being the federal agent who failed my mother and became the woman who taught me that books could save your life." Sophia stood, crossing the room to stand beside Carmen at the window. "I don't need you to apologize for choices you made before I was old enough to understand them. I need you to help me make sure no one else dies because of them." Outside, a car pulled slowly down the street. Martinez arriving for the confrontation Sophia had orchestrated with the precision her mother would have admired. The past and present finally ready to collide. "What do you need me to do?" Carmen asked. Sophia smiled, and for the first time in months it looked completely genuine. "Help me finish this." Among the bills and book catalogs was a postcard from Buenos Aires, no message, just a photograph of a university library, and Sophia's careful handwriting. "Thank you." Carmen traced the words with her finger, remembering the weight of Sophia's goodbye hug, the promise to stay in touch despite the new identity waiting in Argentina. Another ghost to join the collection, but this one carried warmth instead of guilt. The bell above the door chimed, and Mrs. Henderson shuffled in with her usual Tuesday morning precision. She'd been the first neighbor to visit after the police cars finally left, bringing casserole and carefully avoiding questions about the excitement. Now she moved through the store with proprietary familiarity, selecting her weekly romance novel with the dedication of a scholar. "That nice Sophia girl hasn't been by lately," Mrs. Henderson observed, not quite making it a question. "She transferred schools," Carmen replied, "the practice lie coming easily. Family situation, shame. She had such lovely manners." Mrs. Henderson placed Passion's Promise on the counter, eyeing Carmen with the sharp attention that had made her a formidable high school principal. "You look tired, dear. This whole business has been hard on you." Carmen rang up the purchase, wondering how much Mrs. Henderson had actually observed over the years. The older woman had an uncanny ability to appear whenever something interesting happened on their quiet street, and her questions always carried the weight of deeper knowledge. "I'm fine," Carmen said, handing over the receipt. Just adjusting to some changes. Change can be good, Mrs. Henderson replied with the wisdom of 8 decades. Sometimes we hold on to things longer than we should, thinking we're protecting ourselves. But staying safe isn't always the same as staying alive. After she left, Carmen found herself alone with the silence that had once felt like sanctuary but now seemed expectant, waiting. She walked to the window where she and Sophia had stood that final night, looking out at the street that had housed her exile. The community remained unchanged, children walking to school, joggers following familiar routes. The quiet rhythm of suburban lives lived without secrets or shadows. Her phone buzzed. A text from Agent Morrison, her new contact at the Bureau, all clear. No remaining threats identified. Official debriefing complete. Welcome back to the world of the living. Welcome back. As if the 20 years between had been a form of death, a suspended animation that was only now ending. Carmen supposed that wasn't entirely inaccurate. The woman who'd fled Miami in 1982 had been consumed by guilt and trauma, leaving behind someone who'd built a careful half-life around books and routine. But that woman was gone now, dissolved in the face of truth finally spoken aloud. She pulled out the letter she'd been carrying for days, the one addressed to Sophia's real location in Buenos Aires. Not the safe house or witness protection facility, but the small apartment near the university where she was studying literature under her new name. Carmen had written and rewritten it a dozen times, struggling to find words for emotions that had lived in darkness for so long. Dear Sophia, I've been thinking about forgiveness, what it means, what it costs, what it makes possible. For 20 years I believed I didn't deserve it, from your mother or from you. I thought carrying guilt was the same as taking responsibility. You taught me something different. Responsibility isn't about punishing yourself for past failures. It's about choosing who you become afterward. You chose to believe that the woman who taught you about Neruda and made you soup when you were sick was real, even knowing she was built on lies and silence. That generosity changed me more than any confession could have. I hope Argentina is everything you dreamed. I hope you find in literature what I found in our Tuesday conversations, the possibility of being known and accepted despite our imperfections. Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become. Not because you're like her, but because you chose to be better. The bookstore isn't the same without you, but it's still here if you ever want to come home. All my love, Carmen. She sealed the envelope and placed it with the outgoing mail, another ghost released into the world. Through the window, she watched a young mother push a stroller down the sidewalk, heading toward the park where Carmen had sometimes seen Sophia reading during her breaks. Life continuing, stories beginning and ending, the quiet democracy of ordinary days that she'd once taken for granted. The bell chimed again, and a teenager entered with the determined expression of someone seeking summer employment. Carmen smiled, remembering Sophia's nervous enthusiasm during her first interview 3 years ago, and gestured toward the volunteer application forms. Let me tell you about working in a bookstore, Carmen began, and for the first time in decades, her voice carried no shadows of the past.